Hey guys, here is a video I put together to show some of the basic navigation tools inside SolidWorks. First off, go ahead and open up your copy of SolidWorks. You will want to switch in between this video that you're watching and SolidWorks to test out things that we're doing. So I usually use Alt-Tab to switch in between my applications. Holding the Alt key and then tapping Tab allows me to select a different application, and you may want to get used to using the same keystrokes because it's similar to something we're going to be using in the future. I also want to go over a few quick recommended settings. To do so, we're going to have a part open. So one way we can open up a part is to go through the File, Open, menu selection. If you set up your folders the way I recommended in the file download email, then underneath your C drive, you're going to have a SolidWorks Files folder, and underneath that you will have a Servo City Parts folder. And inside that Servo City Parts, you should have a channel 3-inch, and that's what I'm going to open for us to go through the settings. Now, you should see something like this right now. It is white at the top, white at the bottom, the background that is, and gray along the middle, and kind of grayish over here as well. So they've got this nice pretty gradient. What we want, if we go through this Apply Scene, so these icons across the top, the second one from the right is Apply Scene, and select Plain White, that's what we'd really like to see. The problem is, if I just select that right now and close this, the next time that I open up a part, it's going to be back to that gradient. So I want to set it up so that it's plain white all the time. The reason is, if I leave this gradient out here, if I try and capture this image in SolidWorks and then paste it into a Microsoft document for our engineering notebook, it's not going to look as clean. You're going to see this gradient up against the plain white background of the page. So we want that plain white background in SolidWorks as well. So what we're going to do is to go through the Options menu. So up at the top, very right, you'll see this gear. Click on the down arrow, go through Options, and then over here click on Colors, and you're going to see a viewport background underneath the color scene settings. Make sure that is set to white. If it is not, you're going to click on Edit, and you're going to select the white color and then click on OK. After you do that, underneath this you will see Background Appearance, and you're going to click on Plain. Viewport background will be the color above. So when I click on OK now, I'm getting a plain white background back here. And now, even when I open up a part for the first time, I'm still with that plain white background. A side effect from doing that is, now if I go up here and try and click on Apply Scene, it's going to tell me I can't. The background setting has been set up in Options. I do have the ability right now to change that, but it's going to change that Options. So I'd like everyone to go ahead and leave that alone so that we can get good images from SolidWorks for our documentation. The other thing that I want you to look at, right now your shadows in shaded mode may be checked. So it may look like that, where there's a dark square around that option. And you can see the difference. Now I've got a slight shadow that's around my part inside SolidWorks. Again, that's something that we really don't want. Cleaner documentation would specify that we don't have that kind of a shadow. So we want that unchecked. That will be remembered. So the next time I close Part or close SolidWorks and reopen it, that specific option will be remembered. The rest of these, if you click down here, so this is a View Settings option. If you click into that and see all of these options, all of these should be unchecked. So make sure that all of yours are unchecked. And I'm not going to get into the reasons or the purposes for all of these, but for our purposes using SolidWorks, we're going to leave those unchecked. So let's cover some of the navigation and view options inside of SolidWorks. First thing, of course, I need to do is open up a file. You may already have one open still, but I talked previously about File Open being just one way to open up a file. If you look inside your File Explorer, underneath C, SolidWorks Files, Servo City Parts, you'll see a lot of files if you have your file extensions visible. A lot of files with this SLDPRT extension. You'll also see a few with the SLDASM extension, and we'll get into those a little bit. But these are files, part files, that your Windows system recognizes as files that will open using SolidWorks. So if I double click on this file, it opens it into SolidWorks. Now, the first thing that we want to do and talk about is just how to move this part around, how to look at it from different viewpoints, etc. Using your mouse wheel will get you through most of your navigation inside SolidWorks. So if I roll the mouse wheel towards me, I'm zooming in. If I roll the mouse wheel away from me, I'm zooming out. One thing that does cause some frustration in SolidWorks is if I go to zoom in and my mouse is way over here, believe it or not, I'm telling SolidWorks I want to zoom in on this spot. So notice that this spot over here is empty. So as I zoom in, my part is starting to go off the screen. SolidWorks always zooms in towards my mouse. Zooming out is done the same regardless of where my mouse is located. But when I zoom in, it zooms in centered on my mouse. So it's important to remember that. The other thing that you use the mouse for a lot, if I click on the mouse wheel, turn left and right, I'm turning the part left and right. If I scroll, keep that mouse wheel clicked down and scroll up and down with my mouse, then I'm moving the part up and down. So using my mouse wheel, I can move this part around, turning it and rotating it. Now, right now, you'll notice when I click, do you see that line, that dashed line through the rotate icon? My mouse turns into a rotate icon, and it's got that line through it. That means something special. Right now, if I continue to roll over, I'm stuck right here. As I continue to pull down, the part is not rotating down anymore. The reason is I'm in a mode right now called Rotate About Scene Floor, meaning all my rotating is done with regards to the floor, and we can see the X, Y, and Z axes over here that kind of define where that scene floor is. Y is pointing up off the floor. So I can rotate to here so that I'm looking straight down at the part, but I cannot keep on rotating till I look at that part from upside down. So what I did was I used the right click here to open up this menu. If I uncheck Rotate About Scene Floor, Now, when I get to that point and keep on going down, I can flip this part all the way over. I leave that to you to decide when you want to have that on and when you want to have that off. It's good to know that it's there because sometimes having that rotate about scene floor kind of saves you from rotating to the point where you're not sure what you're looking at and what view you're looking at something. So notice again, if I take it off of rotate scene floor, flip this thing all the way over. If I then click on and re-enable rotate about scene floor, it flips the part back over. It reestablishes my floor for me. A few other navigation tools that I find really useful. One is this. So if you look at the top again, this top row of icons, the second from the left, zoom to area. When I click on this, you'll see my mouse pointer has changed now. It looks very much like that icon right there. Now I can use my regular click, my left click, to draw a box. And when I let go, SolidWorks will zoom into that box that I just created. So it's very useful if I know I want to examine a specific area of a part or of an assembly. I can use this to do so. Notice it's still selected. It is still getting ready to zoom into an area, so I can zoom even further. At this point, if I want to zoom all the way back out and have the part completely fill up my screen, I have this zoom to fit option. And if I click on that, the part automatically fills up my screen. Notice it did that when I was zoomed in. It'll also do that when I am zoomed out. Now, notice through all of that, this zoom to area was still highlighted. I can unselect it to make it back to my normal pointer at that point. The zoom to fit has a shortcut key, and that is the F key. You'll notice here it actually has the F key in parentheses, or the letter F in parentheses. That's telling me at any point in time, if I just hit the F key, I'm activating the zoom to fit. I use that quite a bit if I am zoomed or looking around or really up on something or really far out, or like this where the part is almost off the page. I just hit the F key. The F key is one that I've learned to use quite a bit. There are a lot more navigation and view tools that SolidWorks has that I just don't use as much, but I want to show a few of them to you, starting with this one right here. Looks like a little telescope with an arrow beside it. As you highlight over it, you see it says previous view. This will take me back through all of the previous views in order that I was using to look at the part. So anytime when I zoomed in or zoomed out or rotated in a particular fashion, it remembers where I was, and I don't know what the number is. I don't know how many different views it remembers, but that one is there and is really kind of neat. Another one that you may find useful is not available up here. It's available through that right-click menu that we saw earlier. And that is the pan. So the pan will allow you to grab with your mouse, slide left, right, up, and down. Very useful, especially if you've zoomed in. Now I can scroll along and look at the features really close up. Now notice that the pan, just like my zoom to area, stays active until I deactivate it. Interestingly enough, both of these will deactivate when I hit that previous view button. At that point, both of those will be deactivated. Two others that, again, I don't find as useful. I believe these are more here in case you do not have a mouse with a mouse wheel. And that is this rotate view, roll view option. So these allow my left click or my normal click to give me the roll and turn and rotate options, which if I have a mouse wheel, I just don't find those useful to have available. The next thing I'd like to show you is what is called the display style. So again, looking at this top row of icons, this one that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the right, it's almost in the middle, gives you some different ways of looking at your model. Right now we are looking at the display style that is called shaded with edges. So we have a color defined for the part, which this is gray, kind of looks silver. And all of the edges have these black lines, and the contours where the curve starts and ends is defined by a black line. So that's the with edges part. So if I take the next view down, which is shaded, notice those edge lines have disappeared. Now I am looking at a model that is more realistic, but from a design standpoint may not have the detail that I'd like to see. Personally, I like seeing those edges, those lines that define the edges. Helps me to visualize and see where those contours stop, where the edges are, etc. The next option is hidden lines removed. It makes sense if you go through the hidden lines first. So this second from the bottom option is called hidden lines visible. So at this point you can see, especially like right here, this hole that goes through the piece. I can actually see the lines that make up all of the detail of the piece. But those hidden lines, the ones that would be hidden by the part, are drawn as dashes. The difference between that and hidden lines removed is simply that. Those dashed lines are removed. This is almost like shaded with edges without the color. I'm looking at just the visible edges with my dark black lines all the way throughout. The last option is wireframe, and that depending on the part may be useful, but when you're looking at a part that has all the holes, etc., that this channel does that I'm looking at, it gets more confusing than it does helpful. But there are times when that wireframe view has its use. So feel free to try your different display styles out. Right beside display style is view orientation. So we've seen how we can use our mouse wheel clicking on it and allows me to roll my piece around and look at it from different angles. The view orientation gives me some standard views. Like if I want to look at this piece directly from the side, or if I want to look at it directly on that 45-degree angle, I have that ability. So what happens is I click on it and I'm presented my part, or you will see even the assembly is kind of now encased inside this almost a dice or a cube. And the different faces highlight when I hover over top of them. And you can see even over the right, I'm given a preview of what that view actually looks like. And then when I click on that, it actually takes me into that view. So just another way of being able to look at my part from the different orientations or from the different angles. Also, when I click on this, I'm also given all the standard 6 sides of a cube right here. So those 6 sides straight up from the straight from the top, straight from the bottom, front, right, back are easily accessible right there without going through the cube. I can go through the cube and get to those as well, but I can also quickly access those here. Now let's look at assemblies and see how assemblies are different than parts in SolidWorks. First thing we want to do is to go open an assembly, and I'm going to go into my File Explorer, where before I was in the Servo City Parts folder. Now I'm going to go into the Lord of the Bricks 2017 converted folder. So this contains a lot of the builds that we used to make Black Arrow this past season. And we are actually going to look for build servo block, which is right here. Again, you can see this SLDASM extension, meaning that this is a SolidWorks assembly file. So double click on that, and you might recognize this. This servo block is one that they recommend with Servo City through a video, and we actually use this servo block to power our Joule extension this past season. Now you notice I did cheat a little bit. I do not have the actual screws that are holding the parts together, but we'll get to that later on. So when you are dealing with a assembly, a lot of what we've learned with parts remains the same. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can rotate. Again, if I have the rotate about scene floor, it's going to try and keep me from flipping this thing upside down. I can zoom to a specific area on the assembly. I can hit the F key to go back out to full view, etc. All those things are still available to me. One of the things that you'll notice is over here on the left is a tree view of what has been made to build this assembly. And if I click on a part, so you might recognize this part right here, if I click on it, that part is actually highlighted over in my tree over on the left hand side. In a similar way, if I click on a part over in my tree, that specific piece is highlighted in my model. So there is a obvious relationship in between this tree and my 3D representation of my model, and I can find my various parts through clicking on one or the other. One of the things you're going to notice over in this tree is you can see the difference between that icon and the two icons that are right below it for the servo and for the pillow block. This is the same kind of icon that's right on top. The difference is this is a part. These are actually sub-assemblies. So this is an assembly that I used to make this bigger assembly. And when I click on for instance, the servo down here, instead of it highlighting the servo there, it actually opened up this subassembly and highlighted the actual part that I clicked on. The servo is an assembly that is built of the big housing and the little servo shaft. And you can't see the servo shaft because it's covered by the hub here. But we have a similar relationship here with this pillow block. So the pillow block is the block that is attached and the bearing. So you can see the bearing underneath this hub here. So this pillow block is actually made up of two parts. Now you'll notice when I click on the tree, it highlights both parts. If I click on just one part, it'll highlight just that part. But when I click on the assembly, it highlights the entire assembly. Now, something else I have the ability to do inside this assembly is to open up a part file from this assembly. So if I want to actually open up and look at this part, that is a regular left click, brought up this context menu right here, and then that folder with an arrow on it says open part. I click on that, and now I have opened up and I am looking at this pattern mount, side tapped pattern mount A. Now, remember I said Alt-Tab was important. When you are inside SolidWorks, you actually use the Control tab, not Alt-Tab, Control tab, to switch between different SolidWorks parts, assemblies, whatever documents, if you will, that you have open inside SolidWorks. So I hold down the I hold down the Control, and I tap on the tab, and then I let go of both of them, and whatever is the selected item, I jump to. So right now, I've got three things open in SolidWorks: the channel, the side tapped pattern mount, and the pillow block. Now, just like I could open up a part from inside an assembly, I can open up this assembly or this subassembly from inside SolidWorks. And now I'm looking at another assembly, the bearing and the pillow block itself. Now, anytime you want to close down a document, the close is over here. You can also do a file close. That only closes down that document. It does not close down all of SolidWorks. It is actually file exit that will close down all of SolidWorks, or the X up here at the top. But the file close and this arrow, this X right here just closes down the individual documents. Now, inside that Lord of the Bricks 2017 converted, you will find, as I mentioned, a lot of the assemblies that we use to build Black Arrow. You will also find the full build itself. And that is under, where is it? Ah, there it is. Black Arrow full robot full model. Now this is the colorized version that I used to help make the one sheet for MTI. So all the assemblies are colorized, and I'm not going to get into that today, how you can do tricks like that, but we'll get into those things eventually. But from here, as you can see, it looks like a very minimal tree. over here. That's because things like the lifter and the gripper are a single assembly that was brought in. Here it is, lifter and gripper. So all of that is a single assembly. Again, I can click and I can open that. And once I open that, I'll see that the lifter and the gripper are two separate assemblies. Two-stage cascading lift and the lift gripper. So you are free to come over here, open up things from our build, explore, learn what you can. On occasion, you are going to get a message from SolidWorks that says a model has changed. Do you want to rebuild? That's up to you. You can rebuild. It's not going to hurt anything. Other times you're going to be closing things and you're going to get messages like this. The following documents have been modified. Save them. You're not saving the ultimate copy of it. You're only saving a copy on your hard drive. If you end up messing anything up at all, you can always reload or re-download the files from the link that I sent you via the email. So that is it for now. I know this was a long video, so thank you for sticking through it. I'm sure some of you made this a couple of different sessions, stopped the video and then came back. So I look forward to working with you guys over the next several weeks throughout the summer.